one of the reasons why I keep coming back to this series, Anti-Racist Practices for Faithful Leaders, in many ways is my own conditioning and training as a seminary trained person. And really the awareness of how my seminary education taught me to think of the questions of racial justice as a sort of heart commitments that I needed to try and work out in the world, but that they were sort of parallel to ministry, not the heart of ministry, not a core foundational organizing principle out of which I moved. And I think for a long time that really hindered how I approach the work of anti-racism. It was always programmatic. It was a thing that we did, but it wasn't a question of how did we be? How did we show up? What did we incarnate or animate in the world?
Yeah, I resonate with that. And I also, in my experience in congregational ministry and also in commitment to social justice, what I think happens oftentimes is that we find ourselves in leadership in spaces that that are not always equipped and haven't asked the questions of what does it mean to be a place that's rooted in justice, to be, what does it mean to be a place that embodies anti-racism? And so we think of it as something that we go and do. And sometimes if there's a gap between where we think our congregation, our community, or even our organizations are, then we end up compartmentalizing the work, which is the opposite of principles of anti-racism, right? And so, one of the things that I have found in the work in coming alongside movements for justice, whether it's campaigns around housing access or water or anti-racism or for Black lives in the Chicago area, is that or even organizers of those movements are saying to pastors, stop coming by yourself. That's you here by yourself is not changing the lived experiences of the people in the communities and the neighborhoods that we're trying to impact. Your impact is actually with your people. So 2 things: do the work in your institution and in your organization. If there are spaces that are incredibly fraught with privilege and resources, then it's really important for folks to come alongside and understand their complicitness in this oppressive system and the ways that they can use those resources for change. If you're serving in a place that's experiencing the impacts of oppressive systems, then what is it that folks need to know and understand that give them a sense of connection to movements that will work for their own transformation, their own liberation, right? To fight through complicitness and complacency, right? And so do this work where you are. And when you're ready, mobilize your people and come together, because that's what we actually need even in the work for social justice. And that, I think, has been one of the hardest things for me to hear and to take in, that I can't separate or compartmentalize this work, that my call is really about in this place where I'm called to live and serve and preach and teach. And how do I do that in a way that's rooted, as you're saying, becomes a way of being, not anti-racism that I'm doing to someone, right? But that I'm being.
Yes, we've done enough doing to people. I think that, the thing that brings up for me of why series like this are so critically important is that we have, unfortunately, in the church, internalized, and in white dominant churches in particular in the US context, have internalized ideas of ourselves as sort of being exempt, right? So we are the good ones. We are the good people. We are the ones that fix things. We are the ones that do good things in the world. And so that Christianity has turned into this sort of a company that manufactures good things, that make good people feel good about their goodness. And I think that if we're going to be about the work of really engaging in anti-racist transformation, and if we are going to be about the work of seeking the liberation of not just human beings, but of every living thing, including this earth that we have been entrusted with, then we have to begin to unpack the idea that we are in fact not good. We're not the good ones. We are just the messy, complicated accomplices of all kinds of evil in the world, and that complicity doesn't erase our inherent worth and dignity and goodness that the Creator gives us. But it certainly doesn't make us exempt from having to do the work of grappling. And I know for sure that as a religious leader, that nuance was not something that I understood for a very long time, which then meant that the strategies I kept trying to deploy to engage people were strategies that actually ended up reinforcing those ideas as opposed to inviting them to interrogate them. And the second thing that I think is really hard for us in religious leadership and Christian leadership to begin to erase is that out of our narratives of like social justice and social outreach and reconciliation, we've externalized the work so that the work is over there and racism is over there, and those people need us. Them are the ones that we have to save, as opposed to saying, how is our life, our very being, dependent upon us being in a conspiracy with others, seeking an inbreaking of the realm of God on this earth, a liberation for a breath of life for all of us. And so for me, the invitations to think about anti-racism as a practice, as an exercise of faithfulness, not a programmatic aim, are actually critically important, particularly for the world we live in today.
Yeah, I agree. And the intent for this series is to help us live into that as a lifelong practice, right? So it also is not meant to be a programmatic checking of a box, but to say, how do I actually shift my ministry, my sense of who I am as a leader and who I'm doing this work with, in collaboration with, forever on a new trajectory, right? So so the series is meant to begin to peel back and equip us to make that shift, so that those practices become a place that we can be rooted and embedded.